Hi, this is Paul Sackis, Good News Planet. I'm speaking to Susannah Gora. Hi, Susannah. How are you?
Hey, thanks for having me. I'm great.
Good. You're former associate editor of Premiere Magazine, and you covered film and in the entertainment industry. We got to know you through actually a film festival at the wonderful, fantastic Friars Club.
Right.
And well, tell us what was that program at the Friars Club, and what is that program? Because you continue to do it.
Well, the Friars Club, of course, is the legendary entertainment institution that's been around in New York for over 100 years. We have been the home to people along the likes of Frank Sinatra and Lucille Ball, in more modern times, Jerry Seinfeld, Whoopi Goldberg. It's just a wonderful place, and I'm a member of the club, which I'm very proud about because I grew up idolizing the Friars Club. And I'm one of the Friars who helped create the all-new Friars Club Comedy Film Festival. And we recently had our second annual film festival. The first one was last year. And we just felt that in the film festival world, too often comedy is overlooked, and that this would be our chance to make a really serious, important film festival just devoted to comedy. And we think we're really the only festival quite like it in America.
That's funny. No.
Yeah, that too.
You know, you go into the Friars Club and everybody, it's the best if you're really not a good comedian. Don't be a comedian.
Right.
That's what they suggest.
Right.
Because if you said you went to an institution, you have about 700 jokes.
Yeah.
It's a gorgeous place. It's a glorious place. And it's, as an example, we're working and finalizing a show we did with Jerry Lewis, right?
Right.
And they honored him. And,
exactly.
And the actual event was so funny, I could hardly hold the camera.
Right. It is. You know, we have so many funny people who are members there, legendary comedians, and also people who write comedy, producers, people who work behind the scenes as agents and stuff. And, of course, myself, I'm an entertainment journalist. I write about entertainment. So we've got all sorts of members who come at comedy from lots of different angles. And it's a beautiful place and a real kind of hallowed institution in terms of comedy, and a place with a lot of historical significance in terms of American cultural history.
Yeah. Now, you couldn't ignore me if you tried. The Brat Pack, John Hughes, and their impact on the generation, okay? Successful book, and you wrote it. And why did you write this book?
Well, it's a book that I wrote. I'm very proud of it. My book tells the history behind the making of all those great 1980s teen movies, like The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off and Pretty in Pink, 16 Candles, movies like that. It tells the history behind how they were made through my interviews with the actors from the films. I got to interview people like Molly Ringwald and Matthew Broderick and Rob Lowe and Judd Nelson and Ali Sheedy and Andrew McCarthy. The list goes on. And I felt so lucky to hear their incredible stories behind how these films were made. Really fascinating stories, both in terms of what was happening on set, in filmmaking-wise, and also the personal aspect, because these actors were each other's friends. Sometimes they were each other's lovers. There was a lot of really interesting personal stuff going on, too. So I felt really compelled to tell that story. And while telling the history of the films, I also examine the kind of pop cultural impact these movies have had, because I found that to a certain generation of people, Generation X, let's say, people in their 30s and 40s mainly, these movies really affected how a lot of us look at friendship and romance and love and politics, you name it. So I had the idea to write the book when I was a college student in the mid-1990s, and it's been kind of an overarching dream for me all these years, and I'm so excited. I sold my book contract idea to Random House in the summer of 2007, and I've been working on the book ever since, and it came out earlier this year. So I'm just so proud and so excited with how it's all turned out.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
You know, I have a our company car is a 75 Volkswagen Bug convertible. And, you know, I'll never, ever, ever bring it to a garage because of what possibly might happen on someone's day off or my day off.
So you never know.
Did Ferris Bueller, did that car actually literally go out the window?
Well, it's interesting. I talked to a lot of the people who worked on that movie, and I think what happened was they had a replica car of that Ferrari, which means that it was some other kind of a car on the inside, like in terms of the engine and stuff. But then they had a fiberglass or plexiglass, something like that, shell that made it look like a Ferrari on the outside. And that gave them a little more leeway to kind of, crash it or drive it the way they needed to drive it, or throw it off that famous ledge for that famous scene towards the end of the movie that you're, I think, referring to.
I am definitely referring to it. I love that movie. I loved all the movies. So who was John Hughes?
Oh man, that's a big question. I could take hours to answer it, but I won't. I'll keep my answers succinct. He was an incredibly complicated man, deeply, deeply gifted. In my opinion, the greatest director ever in terms of making movies about young people. I think we've never seen someone more talented in terms of portraying the teen experience on screen, and we probably never will. He had this amazing ability to tap into the teenage soul, into what it really feels like to be young and to be in high school. See, sometimes grown-ups tend to just remember all the fun elements of being a kid, and you forget how hard it can be in high school when you're worrying about where do I fit in, and questions of coolness and conformity and identity, all these things. He was smart enough to remember all of that. And before these John Hughes movies, films about young people tended to be pretty silly. And John Hughes was smart enough to mix the comedy and the fun and the romance of the teenage experience with some drama and some serious issues as well.
Yeah, and he did it brilliantly, no doubt about it, and probably launched quite a few careers for people as well in the process.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting if you think about it. So many of the people who are still really important working actors today came up in a lot of these 80s teen movies. The people who are kind of actors in their 40s and 50s now. When we think about someone like a Matthew Broderick or a Rob Lowe or a Demi Moore, a lot of them sort of got their start in one of these great 80s youth films.
Uh-huh. Well, I see here you have a website called bratpackbook.com. Okay, well, why do they call them the Brat Pack? There used to be some Rat Pack, wasn't there?
Yeah, well, this is one of the things I explore in my book, sort of the history behind how this group of actors became known as the Brat Pack in the 80s. But basically what happened was there's a man who was a journalist for New York Magazine named David Blum. I interviewed him, too, for the book, who was going to do an article, a short piece about just about Emilio Estevez. And so he went to L.A. to interview Emilio Estevez, but while he was there hanging out with Emilio and his friends, these other actors, the journalist realized, wait a minute, I think an interesting story would be about all of these actors, like a group. And so he came up with the phrase Brat Pack, of course, a riff on the famous Rat Pack with Frank Sinatra and Sammy Davis Jr. and all them. And there was this cover story in New York Magazine called Hollywood's Brat Pack that ran in the summer of 1985. And, within a couple weeks of that piece running, a lot of these actors had the phrase Brat Pack near their name whenever they were mentioned in the press. I mean, the phrase really took off like wildfire. And this is the pre-internet days, so for something like that to really be viral, almost in a sense, back in the 80s, was really something else. And I think the article has had a lot of ramifications on these actors' lives, both personal and professional. In terms of professional things, it was hard for a lot of them to kind of escape that label because it was kind of limiting. It made them seem bratty or young or whatever. And personally, it was hard, some of them told me, because when the article came out, this group of friends didn't feel as comfortable being seen hanging out together anymore, and that was sad because they had really been close friends.
Ah, shucks.
Kind of, it does. But, the good news is that now the Brat Pack, that phrase, for the most part, has such a romantic tone to it. And I think kids today hear that phrase, Brat Pack, and they instantly associate it with this kind of vintage 80s coolness. So, time heals all wounds, and I think in a way the phrase Brat Pack now is overwhelmingly a very positive phrase.
Yay!
Yay.
So, last question for you, and there's tons of stuff on your website, and you talk about the Breakfast Club, and you talk about so many other good things, and it's bratpackbook.com, and your book is done very well. It's a leader on Amazon and a whole bunch of places, and people can pick it up here. So what's good news for you?
Well, what's good news for me is I'm just really excited that I got to meet so many of these actors who were my childhood heroes, whose faces were on the posters in my bedroom when I was a kid in high school, and to hear their incredible stories and feel so honored to be able to tell what I think is a really important part of American cultural history.
Yay! Susannah, thank you very much for sharing good news with us.
Thanks for having me on.
Take care.